It's not so much that younger evangelicals are becoming anti-Israel as much as it is that they're just kind of drinking the Kool-Aid of social justice.
Bishop Robert Stearns, thank you so much for joining me on Global Perspectives.
It's an honor to be with you. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I would love to hear your thoughts on where does this, what I see as love for the Jewish people and the state of Israel come from in the Christian faith community?
Well, it's fascinating. And, my own journey kind of, parallels this phenomenon of Christian support. I was raised in a traditional evangelical Christian church, traditional evangelical Christian home. We had an appreciation for the Bible, and evangelicals, that particular branch of Christianity, there's approximately 2 billion Christians on the planet, and about 600 million identify as evangelical. 600 million. And evangelicalism is the only branch of Christianity globally that is growing. So you have numeric growth within evangelicalism, specifically in Asia, Latin America, and Africa. But in the past 150 years, the United States was the bulwark of evangelical Christianity. You can think of Billy Graham would probably be the most noted, face and voice to that. And evangelicals, as opposed to kind of more Roman-based, Catholic branches of Christianity, we have a very philo-Semitic theological orientation. So for us, when we read this book and it says, God's blessing rests upon Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and his descendants, we believe that, and we view ourselves as part of that covenantal continuity. So for me, Ellie, my first trip to Israel in 1992, it was literally like someone just turned the lights on, and it just, all of a sudden, these Bible stories that I'd been raised with, these heroes of faith, all of these things just clicked into place, and that changed the direction of my life.
Well, Pastor, I'm so happy that you raised this issue about the differences between the Roman Catholic Church and the Evangelical Church, because historically, I think in the Jewish world, there's been this reluctance to accept the Christian support for the Jewish people and for Israel, which we are witnessing from the evangelical community because of the history of the Catholic Church and the persecution that Jews faced from the church for centuries in Europe. Do you think that the evangelical Christian community understands that difference? And is there a way that the practice of Christianity is different between these groups?
So it's a great question. It's such a pivotal question. And I think Jewish concern, reticence, hesitance, fear, skepticism is completely warranted if you're going to look at the history. The history of Jewish-Christian relations have been horrible for the Jewish people throughout history, and so we can't pretend that didn't happen. However, I speak with 30 years of experience in telling you that there's a new breed of Christian alive in the world today who say, as Ruth said to Naomi, wherever you go, we will go. Wherever your people are, we will be. Your God is our God. And there are millions and millions of Christians around the world who love Israel and the Jewish people with our lives. We pray literally every day for the peace of Jerusalem, for the strength and security of the Jewish people in the state of Israel. And we view ourselves as those Shomrei HaChumot, those watchmen on the wall, that we are to help build a place of protection for the Jewish people against anti-Semitism. And there are tens of millions, hundreds of millions of Christians around the world who view themselves as one with Israel and the Jewish people.
And that is something that I've experienced myself. I have to say for my audience that I am a board member of the Latino Coalition for Israel. I've traveled with very high-level evangelical faith leaders to places like Guatemala, Brazil, and other places in the country, and I've seen this love for Israel, for Jerusalem, for the Jewish people myself, and that's part of the reason I'm so pleased to have you on. Bishop, if you could tell us a little bit about your organization, Eagle's Wings, and what is the work that you're doing in advancement of all these causes we just spoke about?
Sure. Well, after I had this kind of like just, awakening moment in the early 90s when I went to Israel, I went for a short-term time, and then I ended up volunteering for a Christian Zionist organization based in Jerusalem. And it was just life-changing for me. I came back, I was in my 20s, I didn't know what I was doing. I kind of launched Eagle's Wings. But by 1994, I brought my first group to Israel. And thank God we've brought about 25,000 people to Israel in the past 25 years from all over the world. We've got about a dozen different initiatives, but just to highlight some that I think are most, critical, two in particular. First of all, that historically, a lot of times the pattern has been for an evangelical pastor, they're young, they get out of Bible college, they get out of seminary, they have their first church, they're getting married, they have kids, and a trip to Israel is on a bucket list, and it never really happens for them, maybe till they're in their late 50s, early 60s, even their 70s, and they finally have their one trip of a lifetime to Israel. And I thought to myself, what a wasted opportunity, because that pastor has 30 or 40 years in a pulpit, a sphere of influence. So one of our programs is we identify the best and brightest of young, emerging evangelical voices, young pastors, media influencers, conference speakers, and we scholarship them. We invite them. We say, we want to give you this experience to help round out your biblical understanding. And it has been mind-blowing. We've brought over 400 pastors from across America, Canada, Brazil, and a few from Europe, and literally life-changing. On average, these pastors go from having never been to Israel. Over 40% of them bring a trip from their church within the first 12 months. And then the percentage just goes higher from there. And once you do that, then you've planted that flag in their heart, right? Like nobody goes to Israel once, right? Like once you've gone, they're linked in, they want to go back, their church wants to go back. So that's our pastors program. And then the other program that I'll just mention briefly, the other initiative, tragically, most U.S. universities and colleges have become centers of indoctrination for the far left. And the anti-Semitism that is rampant on college and university campuses across America is horrific and is bone-chilling. And a generation after the Shoah should concern all of us. And so likewise, we launched a Christian birthright, a taglit for Christians, and we find the best and brightest young people, and we've scholarshiped them from 105 universities. We've brought them across America. And so to give young people that gift of getting Israel into their understanding, into their vocabulary, having a, from a distance, it's so hard to put it into perspective, but you spend 10 days, 12 days in the land and things become clear for you.
Absolutely. And Bishop Stearns, and I have to say, when I was 15 myself, I went to Israel on a teen tour, and it was transformational for me, and it really did change my life path, I think, ever after. I'm so curious, when you take these Christian young people to Israel, what are the moments, where is it that they go that has this great impact, and how are you seeing transformation, if you are seeing transformation in them?
There are so many incredible moments. It's hard to boil them down, but I'll give you just two or three. One of my favorite spots, and I think we do this really particularly well. If you were in my home and you're in my living room, above the mantle in my fireplace is the famous iconic picture of the first 66 families that came out of Jaffa, and they're standing on the sand dunes of Tel Aviv, and they're casting lots to build the city of Tel Aviv, and it's a sand dune. And I bring the pastors to that point in Jaffa, overlooking, what is this incredible cosmopolitan city of Tel Aviv, and I show them this picture of these 66 families just over a century ago who had faith, who had a dream, who had a commitment to a better future. And we talk about the power of, Hatikva, which I believe is the greatest gift the Jewish people have given the world. The Jewish people have given the world the gift of hope. And so these are young pastors, they're leaders, right? They're idealistic. They want to make a difference in the world. And so to just show them how the Jewish people have built the state of Israel against all odds is always an inspirational moment there when I show that picture. And
it is pretty miraculous what has been achieved in Israel in such a short time. And as you're describing, a country that was, just swamps and much of it was completely undeveloped. It's hard for people to imagine that in such a short time period, from 1948 to 2021, what has taken place in that country.
Another iconic moment for them is always at the Kotel. The Western Wall is always overwhelming for them. It's always incredible to see the passion, the dedication to the Jewish people in prayer at that most holy site. And then I would say also, as Christians, the Sea of Galilee area has just such a special heart's tug. They're out there on the boats on the Sea of Galilee, and they're shedding a few tears and feeling this is really where these Bible stories happened.
Well, and it is beautiful. I've been there myself, and all of these locations, everything you're discussing is just touching. I think it's hard not to feel moved when you go and see Israel for yourself. One subject I'd love to delve into with you is support for Israel from younger evangelicals. We know from looking at the trends with young Jews, especially like you said, as soon as they hit that college campus where there's so much indoctrination, it seems like going on, where unfortunately these surveys are showing that young Jews are showing less and less support for Israel every year. And I believe we're starting to see numbers like that as well from young evangelicals. Is that what you're finding in your work as well?
So on one hand, I'm gravely concerned. It's a mixed bag, and let me explain why. Globally, the growth of evangelicalism as in general and evangelical support for Israel is extraordinary. South Korea, Brazil, Nigerian Christians, we can go on and on and on. It's extraordinary. So that's encouraging for me for Israel's sake on a global geopolitical level. But I'm an American, and I'm concerned for my nation and our future. It's not so much that younger evangelicals are becoming anti-Israel as much as it is that they're just kind of drinking the Kool-Aid of social justice and not doing the diligence to actually get educated in facts on the ground. And that's why I fiercely believe in our programs, because one trip to Israel just changes the whole perspective and can, really change the course of their lives. So I am concerned, seriously concerned, but it's not a problem that can't be fixed or addressed. And that's why we get up every day and do what we do.
Well, I want to push back on this a little bit, and because this is, is so similar to what's going on in the Jewish community. The notion of birthright Israel having been stunningly successful and having impact on the kids who do get to go on a birthright trip to Israel, and you're describing a Christian birthright. The question, though, is what are we going to do about all the other kids that we can't take to Israel? I mean, we can't possibly take every young Christian, every young Jew to Israel. There's just not the resources to do that. So, how can we influence the others? Yeah,
it's a brilliant point, and I do think that the town square of today is social media. I mean, that is just the place where the war is being waged, and opinions are being shaped in 17-second TikTok videos, you know, so we have to keep hammering away at the facts. You know, people are entitled to their own opinion, but they're not entitled to their own facts. And so we have to stay in the high ground of factual reporting, which includes, by the way, and I think our followers appreciate this about us, no one is sitting here saying that Israel is a perfect nation. Israel is not utopia. You know, it's not all unicorns and rainbows. I mean, there's problems. There's real issues on the ground. And so that's totally legit.
And I have to say, there's nobody who's more vocal about the problems in the state of Israel than Israelis.
Yeah, I absolutely hear you. We can't take everyone to Israel. And I think all of us, and that's why the work that you're doing through this podcast and other media outlets is so incredibly important. We have to continue through social media and we have to pick up our shofar every day and blow it and make our voice heard in the media space.
Bishop, I appreciate what you're saying very much. And to stay on social media for a moment, I think what we saw, which was a tremendous moment of concern, was in this last Gaza conflict between Israel and Hamas in May. While Hamas was pouring down 4,000 rockets on Israeli civilians, at the same time, we saw a war being waged on Israel on social media. We see people like Bella and Gigi Hadid, the supermodel twins or sisters, with over 100 million followers on Instagram, saying things like, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," which is basically a chant for the elimination of the state of Israel. Do you think that on social media we do have the possibility of putting up a good fight on Israel's behalf? Because frankly, we didn't see a lot of allies coming to Israel's support during that most recent conflict.
You know, it's a great question, and you wonder. You reference the Hadid tweets or Instagram posts. You know, you wonder, do they even know what they're saying? You know, do they even know? Have they even really understood what these quotes mean, or is it just sloganeering? And yet, it has very real threat involved in it. So I don't know that I have a clear answer to that, other than all we can do is what we can do. And thankfully, when you read the book, the Bible is never the story of the majority getting it right? Like we can think of Gideon's army of 300. Every biblical story is that the majority has somehow missed it. And God and the forces of good are looking for a group of people who will stand faithful. We're coming up to Hanukkah. The Maccabees, we're looking for those who will stand and do what is right, no matter what public opinion says. But I think I look at, even though it's not solely a pro-Israel organization, but I look at the work of Prager University and other folks like this that are really empowering, young people with personalities like Will Witt and others, Ben Shapiro, who are really challenging young people in their thinking. So I think we have to keep at it. The threat is real. I agree with you 100%. But we know that in the end, truth always wins out over lies, and we just have to continue to stand steadfast in our course.
Well, Bishop, that's such a beautiful message. I want to go to a topic that's a little bit dark and sad, but also needs exploration, which is the persecution of Christians in the Middle East. We are seeing unprecedented persecution, in fact. Could you tell our audience a little bit about that?
Well, Christians are being martyred, killed for their faith, greater now than any time in human history. I mean, how is this possible in the modern world? And yet it's happening everywhere across the Middle East and also down into Africa. The voices of justice are somehow silent on these issues. It's mind-boggling that you can have literal genocide happening and the UN is silent and Hollywood is silent. And the only place in the Middle East where Christians are living in safety and where their numbers are growing is the Jewish state of Israel. I mean, go figure. It's the only place in the Middle East where Christians are living in safety and security. This goes to a real rift that's happening, I would say, in Christendom, in all of Christendom with a capital C, all of Christianity, where you have certain groups that are just moving away. They're really moving toward a kumbaya, light a candle kind of religion that is not grounded in their historic, faiths. You see right now across the world, denominations splitting in half. It's happening almost constantly. And the persecution, the martyrdom of my brothers and sisters around the world is tragic. And it's something that's got to be spoken out about. And I'm so grateful to the state of Israel and to the Jewish community who are raising this alarm and raising this problem. So we live in highly unusual times, but I'm just idealistic enough to believe that light always triumphs over darkness. And that's the message both of Hanukkah and of Christmas.
Absolutely. Bishop Stearns, what I think history has proven over and again is this famous quote from the former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, Rabbi Sachs, who's no longer with us, when he said the hatred that begins with the Jew never ends with the Jew. And so I do hope also that our audience will take that message that, it's important to fight anti-Semitism because it's the right thing to do, but also let's fight anti-Semitism because ultimately any society that allows anti-Semitism to flourish winds up paying for that themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more.
Bishop, last thought. When you spoke just a moment ago about the loss of faith in America and in the Western world, I think that is a really important subject to explore a bit, because with this loss of faith is coming other factors in society. What do you see right now in the United States that you think perhaps is linked with America becoming a more and more secular country every year?
Somehow we have bought into a lie that as technology advances, our need for God lessens. But what we see is technology is advancing beyond our souls, humanity's soul's capacity to master technology rather than having technology master us. And I think that brings grave concern to all of us. We are becoming addicted and controlled by this web of technology that permeates every area of our lives from the moment we're awake to the moment we go to sleep. And I want to say, and I know that I'm going slightly off topic, but I'll come back to it in a second, but I want to say, to me, this is where the power of Shabbat is so absolutely stunning. That in the midst of the week, that God says, everybody stop everything, because your souls need to be replenished. Your spirit needs to be at rest. And you need to look your family member in the eye. And you need to have conversation about things that matter. The gift of Shabbat to the world through the Jewish people, to me, is one of the great safety nets, one of the great defenses against this encroaching technological web. But back to your question in particular, we had a very simple prayer we used to say in American schools. It was a 2-sentence prayer, and we lost that whenever that was. I think it was the early 60s. And from there, who would have thought that, the 10 Commandments could be controversial, or the Sermon on the Mount? There were generally accepted principles of American life. When you remove those, you come to the place where we are now, where words don't mean things anymore. We can change language. Words mean whatever words mean to you. And now we have this concept of my truth. Well, I need to speak my truth. Well, there's no such thing as someone's truth. There might be someone's experience. There might be someone's perspective. There might be someone's history. But truth stands alone outside of any of our experiences. Truth is itself. And we all need to be seeking the truth and seeking to walk in truth. So we go down a dark rabbit hole of morals and psychological relativism that leads to a kind of genuine insanity. And that is what we are seeing across the nation right now. I pray that there's going to be some wake up happening, and I think some of our young people are waking up and seeking something deeper, more meaningful. But I don't believe humanity can exist without a sense of connection to the divine, because to be human is to be made in the image of God. And so there is an inextricable link between being fully human and having an awareness of God. However you process that, no one's trying to make everyone into their own, thing. However you walk on your spiritual journey, all of us should aspire to truth, to peace, to hope, to the better ideals that the image of God calls forth in us.
Bishop Robert Stearns, I think that is just truly inspiring words, aspiring to peace, to humanity, to living a meaningful life, which I think is something that all of us can certainly say is the worthiest way to live. So with that, I thank you again for joining us on Global Perspectives and for all that you do to advance humanity. It's been a great joy and honor to be with you. I'm so grateful. There was one fact that Bishop Robert Stearns shared with us, which really caught my attention. It was that number, 600 million evangelical Christians around the world, at a time when the Jewish Agency for Israel reports only 15 million Jews worldwide. I have been bringing to you Christian voices on Global Perspectives, and I promise to continue to bring them to you. My question is, can the Jewish community really afford not to take this Christian embrace of the Jewish people and of Israel? My thinking, let's take this love and run with it. Thanks so much for joining me on Global Perspectives. Join me the next time.